Fantasy playoffs are coming up, and the fantasy football trade deadline is this week. So these are a few players that you should buy in fantasy football before the trade deadline. I'll get it started. You guys knew where I was going in this. Everyone hop in the car, hop in the Maserati for a little ride. It's Maserati Marv. He's the easiest buy in all fantasy football right now. He hasn't delivered on his draft capital. He was getting drafted as a wide receiver 1. He's been a low-end wide receiver 2 for, I think he's, the wide receiver 23 right now, if I'm not mistaken.
Which isn't the worst.
He had a good game against the Jets. Let me just pull it up just so I know what I'm fucking talking about. Bear with me 1 second. He's the wide receiver 17 on the year, so he's a high-end wide receiver 2 right now. But, listen, this is a guy who you trade for if you know you're making the playoffs, if you're not fighting for your playoff life. Because, again, it's the trade deadline this week. He's on bye this week. So, if you're fighting for your playoff life, obviously don't trade for a guy on bye because you need to win games. But if you could, potentially afford a loss or have other options who you feel comfortable starting where you're not punting your season away, or feel like you have the playoffs on lock, this is a guy who just has an insane playoff schedule and just rest of season schedule. I'll list it all for you guys. He is Seattle. He is the Vikings. He is Seattle again. He is New England. He is Carolina. And then for the fantasy championship, he is the Rams. These are all favorable matchups. And the way Kyler's playing right now, it just makes sense that Marv's going to eat. I always say after the bye, that's normally when rookie receivers get going. He's going to get more integrated into the offense just because he's that guy. He's that dude. They know he's that dude. He's been pretty great this year for a rookie wide receiver. I know he hasn't lived up to the generational hype that he was getting. He'd come in and be a top 5 receiver in the game like one of us said. But he's been pretty damn great this year. And again, I think given the schedule, given the history of rookie receivers turning it up after the bye week, and the fact that he is on a bye week, so, if there's a team who is fighting for their playoff life right now and can't afford to have a guy who's on their bench on bye right now, maybe you could get him for a little bit less than what his value is. I think This is a guy who, from week 12 through week 17, the fantasy championship, I think there's a real conversation to be had that he could finish as wide receiver 1 overall throughout that stretch.
Yeah, most definitely.
So,
yeah.
Do you want to list your other one?
Yeah, go for the other one.
Yeah. My other buy, I'm going with another rookie wide receiver. It's a guy who I've talked about on a few occasions. It's ODUNZE. And I think, simply put, he's the best receiver on this Bears offense. They're making an offensive coordinator change. They don't have Shane Waldron, the terrorist, anymore. Hopefully that helps. I just believe in the talent in Rome. You could get him for so cheap. It's just like, no one's really starting him right now. Yeah. I mean, in my 10-man league, I picked him up off the waivers. Like, obviously, if you could get this guy off the waivers, you pick him up and stash him. But
as low as you're going to buy him.
Yeah, I mean, you could basically get this guy for crumbs right now. He's a rookie receiver again. It normally takes some time. Obviously, they had their bye already, and it didn't really help. But, I mean, obviously, it was dog shit, but he led them in receiving this past week. He's pretty much been Caleb's favorite target to this point in the season, and as time's gone on, they've gained more and more chemistry. If you just watch film, he looks like that dude. His routes are great. He has great hands, all that fun jubble. So I wouldn't be shocked if ODUNZE ends up being a league winner, given the low price that you could probably get him for right now.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah, especially if you need just like a flex guy or something. My first buy low candidate is a guy that I've been high on all season. Even before the season, I was hyping him up. I have him in 5 out of 6 leagues that I'm in. It's DK Metcalf. DK right now is the wide receiver 25 in full PPR, and he hasn't played in 3 weeks. I believe he was the wide receiver 9 or 10 when he got hurt. And let me see how many. That's with only 3 touchdowns on the year. This guy's going to score the rest of his schedule. He gets San Fran this week. Tough matchup, sure, but he gets the Cardinals, the Jets, the Cardinals again, the Packers, the Vikings, and then the Bears in the fantasy championship. So some favorable matchups in there. He's a great receiver. Geno Smith, I think, still leads the league in passing yards, if I'm not wrong. If not,
he's, I think, second to
somewhere.
Burrow.
Yeah,
Geno Smith throws the ball a lot.
Yeah.
He loves to throw to DK. He loves to throw it deep. And bottom line is I think positive touchdown regression is coming for DK. Mm-hmm. And as a DK owner, I'm not trading him because I'm high on him, but there are some out there that haven't had him play in 3 weeks and maybe are a little, they need to make a push for the playoffs and they want a guy with more security. So I think you should go grab DK Metcalf. My second buy candidate for the trade deadline is Rhamondre Stevenson. This is a guy who he's had some big games and then he's had some not great games for sure, but Patriots are picking up a little steam here. Drake May's getting better as the season goes on. I think the offense will be better, but the main selling point for Rhamondre Stevenson is the schedule. He gets the Rams this week, then the Dolphins, then the Colts. Does have a bye week in week 14, so make sure that's something you can deal with. And then for the fantasy playoffs, it's Cardinals, Bills, Chargers.
Right.
Chargers are a great defense, but those other two defenses he can definitely put up some big games against. I know running backs are usually pretty scarce in fantasy football, so I think Rhamondre Stevenson's a terrific buy low candidate.
The offense for the Patriots should overall just get better as the rest of the season goes on.
Right.
If Drake May develops the way we hope he should develop.
He looks solid.
Right, which will lend to more, red zone and goal line work for Rhamondre. So,
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. Building off your running back buy candidates, I know these two guys may be a little bit pricey, this one especially. One of my buy candidates is Josh Jacobs. I just think, personally, one positive touchdown regression is coming. He's due for it. He's only had a few touchdowns this season in a great offense that's probably only going to get better because Jordan Love just steps the game up down the stretch of the season. So I'm expecting the same thing this year. Congrats to Josh Jacobs for finally getting his first receiving touchdown this season. And the schedule's light. For the remainder of the season, he has Chicago, San Fran, Miami. Of course, Detroit's a little tough. Seattle and New Orleans, and then Minnesota in championship week. That's a little scary, but just to make sure you all feel better about it, Josh Jacobs has had one game so far this season under 11.5 points. One. That's it. He's about as safe as they come because he's so involved in a great offense, and I think with the potential for even bigger games in the future, he's a pretty easy guy to plug into your RB2 spot, and hopefully doesn't cost an arm and a leg. I think he's worth trying and seeing where the owner feels on him. So, next up, I have David Montgomery, the ultimate RB2. In my personal opinion, David Montgomery is probably the safest play in all fantasy football. Week over week, the man is guaranteed at least 11 points. Why? Because the Detroit Lions are so heavily powered on offense that he's guaranteed a touchdown almost every single week. And so far, in 7 of their 9 games, he has scored 1. So, therefore, I think David Montgomery should never cost too much because of Jahmyr Gibbs, and the fact that he exists usually scares David Montgomery owners just a slight bit. So I think Monty's the perfect type of guy that you want in your RB2 spot because he's safe, or even in a flex spot, and usually that's going to turn into some great production for you. So I think David Montgomery's a great buy candidate, and his schedule is super light. Bunch of weak run defenses coming up, so go get him. Lions are a power run football team, so
I love it. As for me, I'm gonna be really big on buying Tyreek Hill.
You are.
Tom's dying to sell him.
But will you do it?
Would I do it? I would if it makes sense, of course. We got to fill in the gaps in our lineups, which is what Tom hears from every single time. But I'm definitely very big on Tyreek Hill. We've only seen a little bit of Hawk Tua, coming back. And I do think he is on, he's a little edgy. But at the same time, hey, let me start conversations.
Hey.
I think he's a little bit on edge, of course, with, him being so injury prone.
He's edging a little bit.
A little bit injury prone. But I definitely think Tyreek Hill, especially for a guy who was drafted in the first round this year, playing the way he's been playing, a lot of people are very disappointed in him. They're going to be willing to sell him. And I do think he's worth a buy. Maybe throw him, at this point, maybe in the flex spot, just for comfort. Of course, his upside is very, very, very high, and we just haven't seen much yet. But I think a lot is to come, especially with them trying to get a wild card spot. He's definitely going to have to step up his game a little bit.
Yeah, that's my chief selling point. Is just the name. It's Tyreek Hill. Like people,
it's the name.
You'll find often in fantasy football, people will buy just because of name value.
100%. And even looking at their schedule, I mean, look, they got the Raiders, then they got the Patriots. Green Bay is going to be a bit of a tough one. The Jets, it's a divisional, but
suck.
I'm as a Jets
Say it like it
fan,
is.
emotional
They
Jets
suck.
fan, I'm not happy. And then they got Houston, who's in kind of shambles right now. Then San Fran, and San Fran's obviously a tough one. That would be your championship game. But if anybody's gonna show out on that team against San Fran, we would like to all say on paper it's TYREEK, right? Even though it hasn't been the case, but you still got to project in that way. Second, a player that I'm very, very big on the buy. If you could definitely get him, trade for him, go for Tony Pollard, man. I feel like I haven't been hearing his name a lot this season, and he's just that sneaky running back that's in some of those guys' lineups that's just doing very, very well.
Rock solid.
Rock solid,
Yeah.
bro. Pause. And you know what? A lot of people aren't talking about him. A lot of people aren't even noticing him. But the people who have him know how valuable he is.
Yep.
And for that, it might be hard to get him from them. But at the same time, you could maybe dangle over another player over their head, just to get Tony Pollard if they think they're getting a good deal. As for their the lineup for the next couple of games coming up, they're versus Minnesota. Of course, that's going to be a little bit of a tough matchup. But then you got the Texans, which we know how that's going. I'm not too worried about that matchup. Then we got the Commanders, which I know that's going to be an interesting one, but I don't think it's a recipe that Tony Pollard can't get his hiney into the end zone for. And looking at Jacksonville, I think he'll crush that game. Cincinnati, I'm sure he'll hold his own. And then Week 16, the championship game, that's against the Colts. I think Tony.
Week 17 is
That's
championship, yeah.
But Indy
Week
in
16.
the semis. Indy
Oh,
in
wait,
the
17
semis.
would be the
17 would be
Yeah.
the championship.
So I was incorrect because I went for 16 for the last player too. But even at 17 versus the Jaguars, I think he'll hold out pretty good for a championship
better,
game,
yeah.
man.
There you go. Yeah.
That's a guaranteed dub, man. So I'm definitely big on Tyreek Hill and Tony Pollard, and get him if you can. Why the fuck not?
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement. So
Yeah.
be sure to go get some of those guys, man. Especially in Dynasty. Dynasty, I feel it's so much easier to make trades. So throw a second round pick for Tony Pollard. See if the guy's willing to trade him.
Yeah.